How's it going, man?
How are you?
Yeah, not bad. How are you?
All right.
Good find
Can't
on
complain.
that Zodiac thing, by the way. That was well spotted.
Well, just how do we maybe just like the last couple of weeks there was I this number popped up for me a couple of times, 47, and I normally don't pay any heed to that kind of thing, but and like coincidences and synchronicities or whatever, but I don't put that much heat on it, but it seemed to pop up a couple of times and it kind of resonated with me, and I was like, for some reason I just had a bit of a hunch about it. So I contacted you and just to see you being the occult expert. Well, well, you are really, I suppose, and just to see if it had come across your bows ever, or if it made sense to you. And you made that comment, the 4 and the 7 equaling 11.
hmm
So can you talk a small bit about that? Because I know the 11. Well, from what I understand of it, right, 10, which is one, 11 usurps 10 plus 1. So 10, as I understand it, is a representation of sort of the natural order. The 1 being sort of a phallic male symbol, and the 0 being sort of, the womb or the female. So as I understand it, rightly or wrongly, the 11 then usurps the 10. It's a sort of, it dominates the natural order. So that's one understanding I have of it, rightly or wrongly. Another understanding I have of it, rightly or wrongly, is that there's some sort of representation back to Boaz and Yakin and the Kabbalah, and it's also possibly or potentially tied into modern symbolism in the Twin Towers, etc., etc. So would you tell us a little bit more about? Am I right or wrong? Or
Well, you're totally correct. Yeah, that's the reason they chose 9/11. It was essentially it skips over the 10, which is the number of completion. You also see it, by the way, with the distinction between the Ankh symbol, which is a symbol of life, obviously in the Kemetic religion and even beyond that, because it is the 1 and the 0, the male and the female, combined or intertwining on that equilibrium point, that horizontal equilibrium point on Earth, essentially. And this is, again, that's completely inverted with the artificially established Christian cult, which didn't start off with the crucifix as a symbol of its religion. It was actually the fish, because obviously that was the cult to bring us in, to usher us into the age of Pisces. And of course, we had the Christ, who was the Lamb of God. He was to his sacrifice was essentially to put, it was the terminus point, the terminus ritual for the age of Aries, right? So there you have the ram, and then of course he's the Lamb of God. So that you have the connection there as well. It's all this is all ritualism. Did this even happen? Probably not. A lot of this is just retrospectively written, as Armin calls it, event writing and history writing. So yeah, that, of course, with the crucifix, it's the 1 and the 1, the male and the male. So it's death. That's
oh,
why. That's why, of course, they worship Christ on the crucifix. Both Protestants and Catholics and every other denomination that I know of, at least. It's because it's a cult of death, effectively. So there is that interpretation.
just let,
hmm
let me stop you on that. So the
Yeah.
11, the two numbers, the numerals sort of crossed make the cross. So, and it's a death. It's obviously a death symbol when it's in the Christian narrative as such, where Christ dies on the cross
hmm
as such. So, in that sense, is the 11, in that sense of the crucifix or the crucifixion, is a death symbol as such, and it kind of infers the death of God, or the death of the Christian God or
Well,
the Creator. Is
the
that?
the death. I think it started off as the death of Christ,
Yeah.
but there was a clear. There appears to be a clear demarcation in how they've used Christianity as a religion. So in the beginning, when they were trying to expand and effectively get rid of all of paganism, or the folk traditions within Europe, they obviously used it. That was when it was simply just the cult of Pisces in a sense, the New Age in a way. So this was the religion of the New Age. And then, of course, there was clearly some sort of demarcation point, probably around about the 18th century, maybe before, maybe around about the Reformation, around about that date range. They started using the crucifix almost exclusively for the Christian religion, which clearly show, and then of course the whole fish symbol just fell away, which clearly shows that there was a change in how they were viewing the world and how the Christian religion was to interact with the world. And so, as we're seeing, I mean, it is a death religion. It's brought us to the throes of death. It is culturally stagnant. It has no sort of civilizational resistance. It is effeminate. It's impotent. I mean, we could go on and on describing it. Another way to interpret it is, yeah, you could, the two crosses, the two lines that cross could be the 11, or it's simply just the one at, the line at the bottom prior to the intersection with the horizontal and the line at the top. Again, similar to the Ankh, you have the line at the bottom, the one, and then the 0 at the top, or the circle. That is two ways to interpret, but effectively, the 11, if you look at it even in binary code, or just in general symbolism, it's the repetition of a cycle. So effectively, the 1 and the 0 is the beginning and the end, which rounds off the cycle. But the 1 and the 1 is this sort of inversion. It's this. You could think of it in a way as what Yuval Noah Harari states, where man becomes God. It's this idea that matter just never ceases. It continues in this undead, relentless, moribund state. So the whole 9/11 thing was to skip over the 10. That's what the numerical symbolism was. It was basically an inversion, a denigration of the natural order, a Metatronic reversal, is one way to put it. What else could we say about? Oh yeah, so if you look into any sort of, pretty much this is apparent in any mythology. I'm trying to think of any that really don't. No, pretty much them all that I know of, at least. So that's from basically West African voodooism to the folk traditions of Europe, even the Great Spirit theology. Of course, it differed between tribe, but generally speaking in Native American lore. And then, of course, all the way to the Near Eastern and Far Eastern traditions like Hinduism and Taoism. They all have this idea that the 1 is sacred and the 2 is profane. Like the 2 is the most evil number, if you will. And why is that the case? Well, all of them at the uppermost sort of mystery beginnings of their religions, right? Where what the priests believe, the tippy top, the hierarchy believe, the esoteric knowledge of the religion. All of them understand that the 2 itself is almost like the bifurcation of man, or man's soul. It's where man's soul was divested into the material vessel, right? And we entered existence, and to exist, man has to be in exile of himself, right? We're in this amnesic state. So this is what the 2 symbolizes as well. This is why, of course, you see on the Wheel of Samsara, the deity that controls the Wheel of Samsara is called Yama. And that is the Sanskrit word for 1 or 2. 1 or the 2, no pun intended. So you also have other instances as well of the 11 and what it represents. For example, in Kabbalah, you'll have 10 Sephirah usually, but in the deeper Kabbalistic schools of thought, and this is something that came about, I think, with Lurianic Kabbalah and also Cordoveran Kabbalah in around about the 14th century. I can't find any instance of it prior to this, so I'm just surmising that's the case, but I may be incorrect. There was they stated that there was a hidden Sephirah called Da'at, right? And this was the 11th Sephirah. And it was also, its longer name is Da'at Ta'achton, which means the lower point of unity, the lower point of unity. And then you have, of course, the higher point of unity. What's that? Da'at Arich, I think is the term. So that would relate to God, right? So the idea is this Da'at Ta'achton is effectively where man becomes God. It's like a type of it's the point of theosis where man embraces God, or his divine God, his divine birthright, if you will. And funnily enough, if you look at the Sephirah that's around that, it forms a cross. The Da'at would be the center of that, and then you would have the Keter, the Hokmah, the Bina, and then of course all the way down to Tiferet, which is the heart. That corresponds with the eagle or the phoenix, by the way, or the sun as well. It depends what mystery religion you look at. So there's so that's 11 all in all. But if you take all of the four worlds, which themselves have their own Sephirot, their own trees of life, and you stack them on top of one another, as is commonly done by contemporary Kabbalists, and I mean contemporary as in modern, and modern means, post-dating 14th century, Lurianic Kabbalah, then you'll have 32 Sephirah, and the Boaz and Yakin sides, the left and the right, the feminine and the male, will have each 10 Sephirah up that column from on the left and right. In the middle column, what's known as either just Da'at, or in Masonic tradition it's known as knowledge, that has 11, right? That has 11. And what that indicates, again, if you were to look down at it from a bird's eye point of view, is that what it's indicating is that the middle column is closer to the observer, and the two outer columns, the left and right, are further away. Thus it establishes a triangle, which is the generative symbol, which is effectively how the world is constructed, through the Trinity, through consciousness that divests itself into, consciousness as in sort of the sort of frenzy of frequency, right? The beginning murmurings that the stone that was placed into the the sort of void, right? The void, or the abyssal lake, if you will, and then created that ripple. And then from there, you have the consciousness, the sun of consciousness, if you will, and then it goes down and divests into will or action, and then that divests down into the demarcation through the ego, the I, the individual, the individualism inherent within the experience of the human condition, or of sentience in general, right? So this is what all of these things are pretty much relating to. The 47 as well, interestingly, that links with the 47 arc degrees between that encompass the precessional cycle. So between Polaris and Vega, of the 25,920 years, and each arc degree takes 72 years to obviously to proceed to go through that processional process. So yeah, that's what it relates to. And of course, as I mentioned to you, that also appears on the compass of the Masonic sigil.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot in what you've said there, and I want to just, like, for me, a kind of my brain isn't as doesn't have the same horsepower that your brain has, so I need to ask you like one or two things to kind of delineate or to explain some of this stuff. So firstly, this between the 1 and the 2, you mentioned that it recurs at frequent points in different sort of religions and mystical traditions or mythological traditions. But you mentioned the bifurcation of man, that the 2 represents that. Can you explain what does that mean? I think that's the word you used.
It's the idea that man is a tripartite entity, meaning he
Yeah.
is a body, a mind, and a spirit or a spark, as Kabbalah calls it, the divine sparks. But that man effectively, if you were to look at him and look at what he is both a form that contains within it a formless essence.
Yeah,
So
right.
ultimately, when you simplify it all down, that's what the bifurcation is.
Right.
Man,
Okay.
man was God. This is the belief in mystery religions. And
Okay.
you go through any mystery religion, eventually you'll get to the tippy top, and they will just tell you that man is God, and we don't need God. Every
Right.
religion, by the way, will state that too, because every religion effectively hatches from the shell of the mystery religions. So that's what the bifurcation means, that man at one point in time was a singularity. He was God. God had to divest himself, to
Right.
destroy himself effectively, and thus that breath, that formless vapor, that spark, if you will, entered into the clay vessel of man, thus the bifurcation, which is the fall. This is the fall of Eden, or even the Tower of Babel is a similar idea. This notion of the fall, you find it throughout pretty much every religion, though it's most pronounced within the Abrahamic religions, of course. They make a big
So
thing about
so
that.
so when we use that term, the bifurcation of man, it's not an ambition. It's something that has happened. It's God had to sort of, as you say, break himself apart. And
Yeah.
at that point, the bifurcation results in man. So is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So if you look at the tree of life, it doesn't grow from its roots up. It deconstructs itself from its crown, keter, or canopy downwards.
Uh,
So this is exactly what you see with this is what you see if they and funnily enough, this isn't actually this isn't an esoteric point of view. You actually see this within the Genesis story. Even Maimonides mentions it, that we should, the those in the know. He mentions it in one of his works. I posted it in the Discord server. I forget the name of it now. He states that we can never mention about the Merkava, which is the cosmic structure, nor can we mention about the secrets of Bereshit or Genesis. We can't mention about what the secrets, the secret of it was. And the secret is that Yahweh basically planned the fall, right? Or God, or the Elohim planned the fall. Or the gods rather, planned the fall. Because effectively God and man isn't they're in the mystery religion, they're not necessarily two distinct things. God was the primordial, the ancient of days, but he exists now vicariously through man because of this bifurcation, this fall, or what
but
have you. So
when you
yeah.
use the term as such, the terms is the bifurcation of man. So that seems to suggest that man is to be bifurcated rather than he is the result of a bifurcation, if you know what I mean. Because the
Oh,
way you
you're
use
right.
the
You're right. Yeah, you're
am,
right.
am I
That's yeah. You're completely correct. I should actually say the bifurcation of God. You are correct. Yeah.
okay? So are we in slight error then to say to use the term in the sense the bifurcation of man? Should we be saying the bifurcation of God? Is that the traditional manifestation of that term in this type of in the literature and whatnot?
No, that well they talk about its man. They don't necessarily use the term bifurcated. That's the term I'm using, but
Yeah.
they will talk about man as of a twin essence. Another
Yeah.
one is
Okay.
the Gemini. So the Castor and Pollux, that's another
Okay.
mythology you see in that. For example,
Okay.
Castor and Pollux were twins that were born. One was born, well, both of them were born of the same mother, after a night with Zeus, of course, the king
Yeah.
of the gods. And one of them took the divine essence of Zeus, and the other just was a mortal. I think, yeah, it was Pollux that he was the divine one, and Castor was the mortal. Castor was, he was a glorious king, a ferocious warrior, but he died. And of course, his immortal brother Pollux, his immortal twin Pollux, beseeched Zeus because he wanted to follow his brother down into Hades. Because of course he so loved his brother that he didn't want him to be alone, or something along those lines. So of course he dies, he gives up his immortality and follows his brother. So again, these are all harkening back to this notion. The Orphic tradition has a similar thing. The Eleusinian mysteries of Demeter, traveling into Hades, because Persephone has been kidnapped, her daughter. She's trying to rescue Persephone. You have all of these things that are hinting at the same idea. Even Narcissus is another notion, falling in love with his own reflection. Cassiopeia is another instance of this, So it talks about the twin essence of man. It never really talks about a bifurcation, but yeah, man is the result of the bifurcation of God. I think that would be a more accurate term.
Now, just another glossary there on something you mentioned around the number 47, this processional year, and I know can you just give us a kind of a bluffer's guide to what is the processional year? I know it's some sort of aeonic celestial revolution around some orbit around some star system, or can you give us a kind of a bluffer's guide? What is the processional year?
Effectively, well, again, it depends. It's a belief, if you will, because no one has ever actually witnessed it. It's so, it's 25,920 years. That is what was calculated or averaged out by Isaac Newton in the 18th century. And then, of course, he obviously averaged out and calculated the various denominations of that 25,920 years, beginning with 1 arc degree movement every 72 years. But if you look at it, supposedly there's a 47-degree difference between Polaris and Vega, and this is this processional year. Effectively, it's the changing of the North Star from Polaris to Vega, where the Earth revolves on its axis. So it's actually an axial cycle of the Earth, also known as the processional cycle.
So the bluffer's guide is we have 3 stars mentioned here. So at some point, for example, if it's a typical triangular shape between those 3 stars, 3 points, with the apex being one of the stars, the tip, and the other 2 at the bottom, this processional, this angle is between these 2 stars. Is that correct? Between Polaris and the other one you mentioned. What was the other one you mentioned?
Polaris and Vega, yeah. So
they in turn make the angle with the 3rd star of that 47 degrees. Is that correct?
Well, the 3rd star would be the planet Earth.
Oh, okay.
Do you see what I'm saying? So it's this change. Of course, let's assume that we were, looking at it from outside of Earth. That's how it would look. This is the 3 points, and this is of course what you see with as I mentioned, the Boaz and Yakin, and then the 3rd pillar. So it creates this triangle, and within that, the idea is that, for example, as you see on the World Tarot card, you'll always have the four faces of God, or the 4 royal stars of Persia. These are effectively the 4 major epochal shifts within this axial cycle. And this axial cycle, with these 4 major epochal shifts, are usually seen as the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. And the zodiac itself is this Metatronic or aeonic cycle, as you said, this processional cycle of 25,920 years. And that can be roughly, I mean, this is all averages. We don't actually know the full cycle. And believe you me, I'm just simply reiterating what I've read. So I don't even know if, of course, this cycle is a thing. It could just be a complete and utter fabrication of the mystery religions to justify all of this, but this is how they view time. And these things, so each four phases, or each four epochal shifts of this cycle, they correspond with around about 6,000 to 7,000 years. So you will have a grand reset, as we see in the Kabbalah and Zohar, a grand reset every 7,000 years or so. Again, I'm just these aren't strict. It's not strictly 7,000 years. It's not strictly 25,920 years. They're give or take. And this is also, by the way, what may factor into the 47. 7,000 years plus the 4. And you also mentioned the zodiac sign. This is also what factors into that as well. This is the 4 faces of God, as you see in Ezekiel's vision. God even, so Ezekiel's vision, of course, links with the Merkava, the cosmic structure. Effectively, it's the way they view the cosmology. It's the way they view time and life. They view it within this grand cycle of the 25,920 years. And each smaller cycle is contained within that. That is represented, for example, in Ezekiel's vision and Kabbalah as the wheels within wheels. Right, so they have cycles within cycles. The grander cycle that encompasses it all, again, like a Matryoshka doll, the Russian nesting dolls, is that of this 25,920 years, to my knowledge at least. And everything basically is based on that.
But so the processional, like we're talking about a cycle in this 25,000 years. Is that correct? This is a celestial event that is in a cycle. Is that correct?
Yes.
The reason I'm asking is where. So what is in cycle? What is it? The Earth's orbit relative to those two?
The Earth, yeah. So it's the Earth's axial tilt, and it's essentially moving. The idea is that it's moving eventually. I think it was a 23.7 degree tilt on average. Yeah. It will. Okay. That's going to move very, very incrementally. Yeah. Across this 25,920 years. So eventually the North Star, or the North Pole, will align, give or take, with Vega. It won't, of course, be true north, but it'll be near as damn it. A bit like Polaris. That's the idea. So this 47, so the Earth's axial tilt will move through a 47 degree angle between these two stars over 25,000 years, approximately. That's essentially is that correct? Yes, I believe so, yeah. Believe that's what I've read, at least, yeah.
Okay. So then, again, on the 47, as I understand it, this is reflected in the Masonic compass. The angle of the two legs of the compass, as it were, in Masonry, Freemasonry, is a 47 degree spread between the compass. Is that correct?
Yes. Many people have obviously measured it at 47 degrees. I think I've measured it myself some years back. I think it was, give or take, about 47 degrees, yeah. Obviously, I measured it with a retractor, so however accurate that is, but it seemed pretty damn accurate to me, 47 degrees. So, and of course the square is 90. So you put the two of them together, you get 137 degrees, which is the golden section. And in the center, you have the G, which is God, or it could be also. So the G is the 7th letter, but the G, its equivalent in both Greek and Hebrew is Gimel or Gamma, and that is the 3rd letter. So you have this 37 connection as well, which you find in Genesis 1:1. You know, the not Yahweh, but the Elohim, as it mentions in the Bible, the Hebrew Bible. It mentions Elohim. Yahweh comes in at Genesis 2. It says the Elohim created, you know, the heaven and the earth and divide. Again, this dualism, this division, this bifurcation again. They created, you know, light and dark, the sky, the waters, all of this, right? From the void. And so if you, in Genesis 1:1, because obviously Hebrew is an alphanumeric system, it's alphabetical letters also substitute for numbers or values or numerals, then you actually get the Hebrew gematria value of 2701, which is obviously comprised of 37 times 73, which just so happen to be the only two reverse primes that humankind know of in the universe. So, of course, 37, you can flip that around in English, and that almost spells El, right? And then you have Elohim and all of this. Perhaps that, who knows? I mean, English is a creation of these people. It was created by Shakespeare and all of this. So, and Shakespeare himself, who created supposedly 37 plays. There's the 37 again. There's a lot of contention whether Shakespeare even existed. What they state is that what he was an invention by committee of the English elite to establish a counterfeit English culture, or what would later become a British culture. Because what you've got to remember at the time, there was no real understanding of the English. The English were about as fragmented as the Scots or the Welsh, or of course even the Irish. So it was very regional. So obviously you can't have regional identities when you're trying to create a British empire. So then you have to basically, well, establish a new identity like what they did in America, right? The Americans, the whole idea that America is its own independent culture that's a relatively new concept. The American accent as well is something that's relatively new. All the way up until the 1850s, there was still what we know now as Americans that were speaking with a sort of upper class English accent, you know, until there was, of course, this bifurcation between the posh English accent and the mid-Atlantic accent, the sort of posh American accent. So, you know, there was still people in the upper gentry speaking with an English accent. Some of them still saw themselves as culturally, at least in a sort of heritage sense, English, you know, or Scots or what have you. So it's all of these things were invented. They're invented for specific reasons, again, corresponding to this grander cycle. You can actually, we can, if you pull up the World Tarot card, I can actually show you this. So for example, if you go into auto record, and I'll just post this image. So, do you see that image there?
Just a second now. Get in here. Keep talking there. I need to do a bit of fooling around here to find where it is.
Yeah. So, effectively, trying.
Oh, I see it. Yeah, I think.
So basically, if you look at the World Tarot card, so and then we'll go to the Zodiac. I actually have infographics made of these, but we'll just I'll try and find them while I'm talking, but it's they're kind of lost to me now. I'll need to look in. I think it's in the important infographics folder on my hard drive. But effectively, what you're seeing there is Aquarius. In terms of real constellations, not the zodiac. So we have Aquarius, which is Pisces Australis. Then across, of course, to the Eagle. The Eagle is Aquila, but it's most likely Scorpio. And that is, of course, the royal star of Antares. Oh, by the way, Aquarius is Fomalhaut. That's the royal star of Antares, which is obviously in the constellation Scorpio. Down is Leo. That's the royal star of Regulus, which is in the constellation, of course, of Leo. And then you have that of Taurus, which is, of course, the bull. That's its royal star is Aldebaran, and of course that's in the constellation of the same name, Taurus. So basically, what you're seeing, if you were to look up, for example, the age, the dates of these astrological ages, right? We're getting into the world ages now. This world ages concept. I'll try and find it if I can. I'll post it in a bit. But basically, what it is see the entirety of that zodiacal cycle.
Yeah.
There's two ways to look at it. The way I look at it is the 25,920 years. Do you see the axial precession? So that 23.7 degree tilt going from Polaris, pointing up, of course, it's the North Pole of Earth, pointing up to Vega. Basically, within the World Tarot card, that same cycle, as you see on the ring of the zodiacal wheel, that's found within the wreath, which is the Leviathan. The Leviathan obviously comes from the Hebrew Leviathan, which is a compound of two Hebrew words, which means the wreath or the garland of the torturous ones, or the torturous one rather. And so this is what it's indicating. And in the four faces of God, quote unquote, those four royal stars or four constellations or four zodiacal signs that we've mentioned, they each comprise the 7,000 year reset points. Again, I said on average 25,920. We don't actually know the specific dates. So it's basically between a range of 24,000 to 28,000 years. So I'm just mentioning what Isaac Newton averaged at, and that's the general consensus of 25,920 years. So of course, if you divide that by 4, it wouldn't come out to 7,000 years. It would come out to each of these epochal cycles coming out to 6,480 years. So this isn't a precise science. Of course, I can imagine the people at the top are privy to the cycles and all of this. But this is effectively what is the World Tarot card it's the mother. It's this Sciatic Isis, the veiled Isis, which is a symbol of man's own self, right? No man hath ever seen Isis naked. No one has seen, her nakedness directly. What that entails is that man cannot really know himself. Man can never know himself. Man is a mystery unto himself. And it also mentions in Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages with the Sciatic Isis or the veiled Isis. It mentions that her fruits that she has borne is that of the sun, right? So what that means is basically the fruits it has bought, this spirit, if you will, which is the Isis, the divine feminine that has fallen from heaven to earth, and of course resides within us, hence the bifurcation of God. That she has given birth not to the real sun in the sky, but to the soul, right? The S-O-U-L, which of course corresponds with the S-O-L. But it's that which all of the ideas which act as lamps within the world are attempting to almost mimic, right? The lamps, the lights that we generate here on Earth are a mimicry of the sun, in the same way that our personalities, our personas, our mind characters, right? All of those are a mimicry of our own spirit and our own soul of the divine feminine. That's what that represents. And of course, all of this is occurring on the world, which is in this perpetual cycle. Hence, it's called the world, because again, we're being whirled around, right?
Okay.
In a spiral. It's all of these things. You see written. Well, firstly, it's written into the English language. You know, it's a metaphysical grammar. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'll let you jump in, man. Sorry, I went a bit of a rant.
No, so just as a little aside there, I know we mentioned briefly in the past that 9, if I'm right, was the number of men. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, I do recall. I can't remember where I read it now, but I have mentioned before that 9 is the number of man. Yeah, I've read it somewhere. I
Yeah.
can't quite recall where I read it now.
Yeah.
I read it in some book. I
Would
can't
it
remember.
make sense if 10 represents the natural order, like the creation, as it were,
Mhm.
that 1 below that is man, then in the position like 9 is below 10, if you know what I mean? Would that make sense?
Yes. Well, yes. 9 in the Sephra would also be wisdom. So that's it's the sort of beginnings of information, like what we were mentioning, right? It's the will. It's the driving force behind the river, the current. And of course, then the 7 would be Bina, which is the understanding. That's the point where, you know, man becomes the individual, or the I, and the ego. So yeah, absolutely. Of course, man isn't the Keter. Well, he is. He has again, we all have a sort of fractal of God within us. But again,
Yeah.
like the veiled Isis, you can never truly glimpse its nakedness. You can never see its
Yeah.
nakedness directly. You can only sort of, you know, at the very most, you know, work out the form of it. Perhaps a silhouette, but you can never truly glimpse it directly.
But if just to kind of, if we were to zoom out for a second, right, and if we were to say, well, what is the relevance of the number 47 in the wider sense in the occult and the mystery schools or whatever, and if we say that its relationship to 11 is what makes it important, like, is any numerical, you know, sum that will result in the number 11 as important as 47? For example 9 plus 2, or 5 plus 56, 5 plus 6, or so, is any numerical sum that will result in 11 equally important, or are the numbers 4, 7 for some reason specifically important in any way, do you think?
Well, again, it depends on context. It depends on if it's a major event. For example, the Charlie Kirk shooting. You
Yeah.
had 47 and three caps of this 47, of course, relating to the 47th president, which
Right.
he was also the 45th president, hence 9/11. But the 47, 47, 47. So the 3 lines of
I think
caps, of course, equals
it's important to
33.
point out. Sorry to cut across you. It's important to
Yeah.
point out for people like myself that Donald Trump is the 47th president of the United States, which I wasn't aware of that, to be honest. But Mr. Kirk had a kind of a baseball hat with the number 47 on it.
hmm
Had he not? And I think the 47 baseball cap was specific to Charlie Kirk, as I understand it, or perhaps he wore it as part of a kind of a wider MAGA thing or whatever. But as you state, Silas, on the day of his alleged assassination, there was kind of newsreel pictures depicting these 347 hats. Kind of, am I right in saying that there was pictures of them kind of
Yeah.
on the ground after the carnage or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. So that itself was, you know, 3 specific intersecting correspondences with, I guess you would call it. It's not really even numerology. This is more symbolism, because effectively what you're seeing here are symbols hidden within the numbers, which is exactly what gematria is. It's not the fact of, oh, here's this number, you know, we found this number yet again.
Yeah.
It's not that's just, to me, that's apophilia, but it's the fact that what you're dealing with is, think of this as like a very organized and complex form of the Crips or the Bloods. Now,
Yeah.
the way that they function is a sort of, to steal a term, a parabiotic system within society, is that they use something we may call the cheater strategy in game theory. And this is the idea that you will transgress against the majority so that you can maintain in-group loyalty, you can maintain cohesion within that group, and moreover as well, it's also an optimal game strategy. Of course, as long as you don't get caught by the majority, which you never will. Any game of social deduction, for example, Werewolf, which was developed by a Soviet/Russian psychologist, he developed this game of social deduction, which was that all of the individuals, I think it's about 22 or 23 usually, sit in this circle, and two of the people are werewolves, right? So they're working together in their minority, their secret society, if you will, of werewolves. And that after each round, the light will be turned off. Those who are not werewolves are known as peasants, or just players, simply. And the werewolf will go around and basically tap one person on the shoulder, thus killing them, right? And then the lights come back on, right? And of course, everyone's sitting down. The werewolves are sitting down after their bloody affair. What he found was, at least nine times out of 10, so beyond 90% of the time, all of the peasants were massacred, right? Of the 1 time out of 10, there was only a minority of peasants that survived. There was like a minority, a handful that remained, that managed to figure out who the werewolves were. So, any game of social deduction will show you that an informed minority will always defeat the uninformed majority. The way you keep that informed minority, of whom are all psychopaths, how you maintain cohesion in that group is of great importance. The way you do that is through these things. It's basically, it's like urinating to, like what dogs do. They urinate to mark their territory, or gangs will tag to mark their territory and to infringe upon other gangs, right? Because again, when people, when they commit crimes in unison or harmony amongst their group, there's a certain energetic thrill that comes from that. This is what's known as the sort of transgression principle, right? Or the cheater's strategy in game theory. So this is really what they're doing. This is why they do it. This is why. Effectively, in its simplest form, this is what they're saying. Obviously, this is in hushed tones, but they're saying, we know more than you. Our knowledge we are putting on display through symbolism. You do not know this. We know this. You are being completely blinded. You're ignorant, and we're essentially exploiting those negative traits that you possess, right? So again, that binds the criminal syndicate together. It binds them together, and it shows consistently and reinforces that they are different, they are superior to the inferior peasants who do not see it, the inferior profane. So that's the reasoning for it. That's the reasoning for the numbers themselves. But no, not every number that adds up to 11 will be, we can't just take 6 and 5 and say, oh, look, here we go, or things like that. So it's specific numbers, and 47's a major one. I mean that, but you just don't take the numbers themselves. You have to have a whole slew of correspondences. That's the only. I won't even mention the numbers unless there's a whole slew of correspondences, interconnections. So, for example, Donald Trump mentioned that Charlie Kirk was a master builder, right? That's
Yeah.
that's a Masonic position. That, funnily enough, can be traced back into Christianity, the earliest forms of Christianity, where it's mentioned in certain writings. I forget which one now. I'll try and find my notes, but it mentions that Jesus was known as Rabbinon, right? These are in the Nag Hammadi texts, I believe, and Rabbinon or Rabbino, obviously from rabbi. That, funnily enough, I believe it's a degree within the York Rite. That is what you use to describe or to address a master builder or a worshipful master. The two are, of course, interchangeable. They also call Jesus master as well. They call him master in several instances of the Nag Hammadi texts. The Essenes, which also appear, I believe, in the Nag Hammadi texts as well. The Essenes, of whom are the earliest forms of Christianity too, a more mystical sect of Judaism, early 1st century Judaism, they consistently mention this mysterious figure called the Master. Sometimes they call him the Master Builder, So it's...
Or Jesus.
Jesus, yeah. Well, you can only imagine that's who they're referring to,
And is that there what is that like a Masonic appellation? Like, is that?
Yeah, I believe it's the Masonic address for a worshipful master. He who is, or just someone who is, understood the mysteries, if you will, right? He's built his temple, or rebuilt his temple, because remember, we are a bifurcation of God, right? So we are destroyed, so we have to rebuild ourselves. And once we rebuild ourselves, again, the temple is the mind, right? This is why you have the Boaz and Yakin, which is the fornix, which is like these two horns, the two ram's horns, again, the Lamb of God, blah blah blah, and then you have the center, the thalamus, which is the inner chamber, the Kodesh Kodeshim, the Holy of Holies. So it's basically referencing man himself. This is why you have the 33 degrees, because there's 32 vertebrae within the spine.
Yeah.
Dante Alighieri, to get out of hell, he had to climb 33 steps, or was it? Yeah, 33 steps. On the 33rd is man's soul, man's temple rebuilt, we become God, if you will.
Okay, so all of this sort of, all of this Homo Deus and this, as they say, great work is to move to redress this bifurcation and to get back to the God, becoming God, essentially, becoming one. Is that correct? That's kind of what the wider picture is.
Effectively repairing God, but the philosophical ramifications of that is that if you believe that God is, not that God repairs man, but that man has to repair God, then what you're saying is man is destined to supersede God and to effectively become God, which itself is problematic, especially if you live in a supposed democracy, and all of the elite are running around thinking that, one day they're going to be God. And
well, the mechanics of that are sort of difficult. For starters, you essentially need to destroy man as is.
Yep.
Because he's in a bifurcated state, so you must destroy him as is in order to rebuild him. Which is, and not to kind of jump off the point, but it's kind of a reincarnation. We have to be destroyed and then reincarnated as God, like. I saw this James Joyce word remember from back in the day, metempsychosis, which is a kind of a word.
Yeah.
It's an old Greek word, I believe, which is to do with this concept of reincarnation. Like, I think typically when we think of reincarnation, we think we'll come back as a goat or a stallion or a shark or whatever, or as some king in some far-flung place. But maybe we can be reincarnated as God. But anyway, not to get too fanciful on it, but it's clear now. It becomes clear that this bifurcated state is a state that is essentially at odds in their view, like in the cult sort of power structure view, and within, I assume, within Kabbalah and possibly within the Zohar, I may be correct in saying, but that this whole state of man as is just at odds. It's a sort of it's something that needs to be rectified and put back that into to make man into God, using by the hand of man. So it sort of tramples on it tramples on a lot of things, because number one, you have to destroy man, and number two, you have to assume the role of creating God out of man. It's a total inversion, subversion and inversion of the natural order. So it's a huge rebellion of, it's a rebellion of nature and of the divine order, but they see it as some sort of righteous, and I don't mean righteous in morally right. I mean because they can invoke amoral or immoral practice to get there, because the end will justify the means, I assume. But they like, they're kind of hell bent on this. Like, this is, but on a deeper level, what is propelling this within them? Like, why has it taken such a grip on them? If you were to personify them, and if you could imagine that there were a committee meeting in some castle somewhere, vast hall in the desert, and there was, these people, if you could personify them, why has it taken such a hold on them, as it would seem, like to a point of like religious fervor, compulsion? Like, what's the driving force in there, like the real engine room of all this will?
Well, the first thing is effectively the fear of the unknown. That's what, of course, drives all of man. But when you have monopolized all wealth and all resources, effectively, and as I've read recently, I was put onto this by that Predictive History channel, and I don't agree with everything he mentions, but he mentioned this, and I looked into it, and actually there does appear to there's a kernel of it in truth, and he mentions that basically it's found within studies, psychological studies, that the more money you have, the greater probability you have in developing basically what we would term as madness, right? Various forms of mental maladies and disorders. So effectively, you begin to desensitize the rest of the world, and you feel that you are the yoke of the universe, that all of the world revolves around you. And I've posted in the notes there the Orphic egg. You've just mentioned that it's almost like they need to destroy man. Yeah, not just man, the entire world, right? This is the inversion. They're talking about sustainability. That's taking the precedent over environmental friendliness, or ecology, or environmentalism, and all of this. You've now got sustainability, because fundamentally, the reason for the change, firstly, is because they don't want to protect the environment. That's not what it's about. When you look into the policies, what they seek to protect is their own position, and then secondly, to destroy man and to control man, meaning the majority. But fundamentally, they want to crack the shell of the egg, because they believe they are the yolk, the sun, waiting to get out, right? Waiting to be unleashed. This God man who is in an embryonic state within the egg. Again, when the embryo of the hatchling is born, he breaks free from the egg. He destroys the shell. So in this sense, they will have to destroy man. They will have to destroy the world, and they will have to conform it to a new vision, based upon, of course, their zealous beliefs. So what is driving this? Fundamentally, the fear of the unknown. That's what drives all religions. Secondly, sort of a multi-generational, feeling of destiny. This is something that drives a lot of human beings throughout history. They feel as though they're on a divine mission. It really it supercharges them. It's a great way to psychologically conform them and condition them to a certain behavioral pattern. Fundamentally, there's probably a sect of them that knows that all of this is just complete hogwash, and they probably have their own ulterior interests. A lot of this is compartmentalized. But for the vast majority of them, why wouldn't you want to get behind this? You've got all the money in the world. You've probably got about 5 mansions. God knows how many subordinates under you. You've got slaves that, you can feel morally good about yourselves because you call them immigrant workers. You've got all of this. You're basically driving a slave economy. Why wouldn't you see yourself as God? Every indicator is telling you that you are God. The only thing that is stopping you from fully embracing that godhood and self-apotheosization is essentially the constraints of death, and of course the constraints of the world and of nature. So thus you must bend Mother Nature to your will, and to, effectively supplant her through a virtualized world that you can, of course, control. You can reframe yourself or refocus yourself upon that world as the Godhead, the great wizard behind the machine. So moreover as well, you have to effectively destroy God. You have to get rid of religion once it, of course, runs its course. Meaning the sort of revealed religion, the religion you give, the complete crap, the literal crap, that religion you give to the laity. And then, of course, you have to emerge as God. And you can do that technologically, they believe, through the algorithm. Yuval Noah Harari points out quite succinctly, he says, we will become God, even if it kills us. He mentions that in 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And in Homo Deus, he mentions that the new God will be the internet of all things, right? The internet of all things, the all things. And he even mentions that it'll eventually colonize the universe and all of this. So it's basically hardwired into the language that they're using and the way they present themselves. And it's built upon, effectively, their need for self-actualization. Once you have all resources, human beings need something to persist, and to provide for themselves purpose. If not, they'll just self-destruct, So it's... these are the factors that are influencing them, I believe.
But I have a hunch that there's something else pushing this, because by something else I mean something that we may only imagine, really, like some sort of a force or even an entity. Or I have this kind of a hunch that at a certain level you're shown certain things that are outside of our immediate imagination and are maybe supernatural, for want of a better way of putting it. And perhaps, you're dealing with literal forces in the universe that are not human, really, that are manifested in a kind of a way around the kind of things that you're speaking about in terms of material wealth or gain or power or influence or you know and so I have this sense that possibly there's at a certain level you're shown certain things, and then perhaps as well I get this feeling of it's like dogmatic religion where people are totally obsessed with this concept, and it's there's a psychological aspect to it where it inhabits them as such. But and then there's the linear historical side of it, like it, and you can comment on this, Silas. This isn't something that people that Noah Yuval Harari has dreamt up in the last 20 years. This is something that has its lineage that goes back 2,000 years or 5,000 years, and this is is that correct to say that this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This is firstly on the preternatural potential. So this sort of demiurgos. I mean, it's certainly a possibility. I don't put it past them, Again, perhaps it could be an egregore that they have projected from their own dark, twisted transgressions. That is a possibility. However, there could be this dweller within the abyss. I mean, you even have to understand, I don't think a lot of Christians realise this, but so the whole rapture thing was invented, of course, in the 19th century. All of that is from the Schofield Bible, which itself was a completely fictitious translation. And I mean that, of course, we're talking about the Bible and fiction, but I mean, it was something that was fictitious, as in it was artificially constructed for a specific reason, to basically prepare people, to socially prime them for what was coming, so that they wouldn't resist effectively, right? They would be disarmed of resistance. So yeah, I mean, there's certainly something perhaps behind this, a darker, more malevolent force, and basically what you're seeing is the outgrowth of a Bronze Age eschatology, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's the reason they had to Christianize the world and Islamize it. And then with Hinduism, effectively, the Hindus believe that they're connected in some sort of way with the Hebrews, which in fact, from researching it, they're perhaps correct. Again, this comes from the Copper Age or the Bronze Age, the Harappan or Indus Valley civilizations. I get into that in a new book that I'm writing, but effectively what they've done is that they've turned the entire world into an Abrahamic melting pot. And so what has happened is, because they have this eschatology, this end times prophecy within the crux of Abrahamism, effectively they've managed to converge using these three primary religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, as a sort of prism to focus all potential energy on the world within the human species on planet Earth towards this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Which, of course, effectively is this sort of grand, rectifying mass conflagration of forces, this sort of grand theomachy where they finally depose God and break the cycle and become this sort of virtualized, amorphous deity, their own dweller in the abyss, their own lord of all things. I mean, it's very mad when you think of it like that, but what you've got to remember, the entire world, really, the entire world population, this includes the ruling class, by the way, throughout every epoch of human history, can never tell the difference between fantasy and reality. Can never tell the difference. The Apollo grows cold without Morpheus feeding him, effectively, right? And this is what you'll realize, is that if you take a good long look at society, everything we believe is a complete and utter lie. And it's not just a complete and utter lie, it's a ramshackle fantasy. Total fantasy. I mean, let's take, for example, of course, we had the event in 2020. That thing's a fantasy. Of course, I have to be mindful of how I word this, but if you look into Edward Jenner in the beginnings of the theory of the needlecraft, that the whole thing is a complete and utter, it's hogwash. He is a mountebank. He is a snake oil salesman, this Edward Jenner, who founded the theory of the needlecraft and inoculation, if you will. So the thing was complete crap. But these are just constantly touted and reinforced. This idea that smallpox can be cured by cowpox, which is the less virulent of cousin. That's rubbish, because when they hunt their first, I believe it was in the early 18th century, they had this their first inoculation of smallpox, or attempt at least, vis-a-vis cowpox. It went terribly wrong. There was actually outbreaks, more virulent outbreaks of smallpox wherever this was utilised. Fundamentally, I mean, see, when you boil it all down, all of the diseases are, in fact, they're not caused by contagions. They're caused by, the Latin term virus, which means poison. They're caused by poisoning. That's what causes the diseases. The body is very good at maintaining a homeostatic balance. Of course, that diminishes with age, but you tend not to find healthy people dying en masse, other than where there has been rumours of poisoning, either poisoning of the water, poisoning of the food, or, of course, bioweaponry. Bioweaponry simply means anything that any sort of biological attack within the individual. That is a bioweapon, right? Or, of course, you can aerosolize these poisons as well, right? So there's one example. Another example is sustainability, climate change. I mean, the fact that, for example, in my university, right, you can't, again, this is how you know it's a religion, right? Because he asked the question, we went on to sustainability. This was, the lecturer's completely fine. He's very cordial. He's, his discussions are convivial, I guess. They're very good. They're balanced, and he's open-minded as well, but not when it comes to this. So, for example, he asked the question to the class, or the lecture hall, who here, this is before he even started sustainability and the dogma, who here believes that man-made activity is not the primary driver of climate change? Now, of course, even to state that by a supposed learned man is complete and utter. I mean, it's totally irrational. I can't even. It's so absurd, right? It's clearly the big ball of fire in the sky. But so he mentioned that nobody put their hand up. But basically, what he's fishing for is effectively dogmatic loyalty, right? He's seeing, is there a consensus for this? So basically, all of these things are complete lies. All of them. You could pick out really anything in society. The major things are all lies. Total lies, So this is effectively what you see in society. Everything you're seeing is a hyper-reality. You're not actually seeing reality. As Armin mentioned, they create a surrogate or artificial psyche. That is what society is. Sorry, man, I don't know if I answered your question. I can't recall the question. Sorry, I went on a rant.
No, that's fine. No, listen to you there. I wanted to kind of round back in on this whole 47 thing a little bit, right? So, at the risk of going down a rabbit hole a little bit, sure, but sure, look how bad, right? So a little bit from Crowley, and I know we mentioned Crowley actually here. Before I go into this, here's a quick one for you. That card that you presented there on the top right hand side, is that a hawk's head or an eagle's head?
Eagle.
It's an eagle. And what does it represent?
Well, it's either the constellation Aquila, which is also on the zodiacal belt but isn't included in the zodiac, or it's just Scorpio. It's another way to portray Scorpio.
Okay. Because I'm just looking at some Crowley stuff here, the Book of the Law, and I thought it was a hawk's head because there's a line in Crowley stuff here: "With my hawk's head, I peck at the eyes of Jesus as he hangs upon the cross." So I was wondering if there was some.
It's probably very similar. The eagle probably would relate to the hawk as well. The hawk relates to Ra, if I recall, or it may be Horus. The falcon hawk, I think that was. But it effectively all of these birds of prey, they relate to the phoenix, and the phoenix is this idea, of basically breaking free from the world.
Yeah.
This is what Apollo was about as well. Apollo 11.
Yeah.
Right, there's the 11 again. It was
Yeah.
a man breaking free from the egg, right, from the spherical Earth. This is why Earth is, of course, a sphere. It's the egg. We've got to break free from the egg. And so he goes to the moon. And of course, the moon is this sort of feminine entity. And of course, the idea is that he implants with his shuttle, right? He implants, or inseminates rather, the divine feminine. So, and then he returns to Earth, the glorious, mighty hunter. And so it's found, funnily enough, within you see with the Apollo 11, you also find the eagle. The eagle's there on the moon. I forget the badge, but you see the same thing. And even Nixon mentioned it as well, that man has made his nest among the heavens, or that's from a Kabbalistic prophecy that mentions the black phoenix or the black eagle, going beyond the world and reaching the sun, or so on and so forth.
But at the center of all, there's no escaping the fact that there has to be like a priestly class, a ruling class in the middle of all this who are pushing this stuff. Like, it seems that you can't escape that conclusion. Like, there has to be a kind of a central sect, or, as you say, priest class. I mean, is that correct? Is it correct? There's no escaping that, really, is there? And the reason I bring it up is because if you accept that, then it becomes extremely difficult to connect the dots from that conclusion to that sect or class influencing and ruling things like world governments and economic systems. It's a huge leap, really, of understanding to try and see how that infiltration and control is manifesting, really, and is tangible, like, and real. Because I think that's the thing that escapes. Like, I think that's where a lot of people tune out, because it's just too difficult to understand how that could be. But like, it takes a huge amount of standing back from things and just looking at the linear trajectories of history, from national battles between nations to the downfall, essentially, of nations, as Armin was saying the other night. The downfall of nations gives birth to globalism, or to the singularity as such. But it's still a very difficult slice of cake to swallow, even for me. And I've been, I'm interested in this area, but I can still see how it's still difficult. Like, it's a foggy area ultimately, to try and discern. Would you agree? Or?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you don't really have to go into the esoteric. I mean, for example, let's even look at the term priest. So priest comes from an Old English term, presbyter, where we get Presbyterian from, funnily enough. And so the presbyter, or the priest, or from the very Old English, sort of Anglo-Saxon, priost, which is literally just means the elder. So effectively what you're dealing with are the wise elders, right? And the elder itself, again, from an etymology standpoint, is simply he who is ancient. So it's effectively just the ancient lineage of knowledge. Now, how do we know this to be a fact? And how do we know this sort of conspiratorial structure is present? Well, it's rather simple, because conspiracy, from its own definition, means two or more people who collude against the wider interests of the society, right? They collude for their own ulterior interests, right? Now, by that definition alone, that completely describes a hierarchical system, which we would all assume that we're living under, right? So everyone must be a conspiracy theorist, or not even a theorist, I mean a realist. I mean, society has to be the product of conspiracy. That's why you have a scarcity model. That's why you have money. That's why you have people that create the money, those who are closest to the money source. Of course, they feel less inflation than those who are further away. Thus, that implies a hierarchical trickling down effect of the scarcity model. So all of society's social structures, its entire architecture, points to this sort of hierarchical pyramidal machination or scheme, right? Which must be the product of conspiracy. So everyone must be a conspiracy theorist, or a conspiracy realist, rather, in this sense. Because if you're not, then you believe that we don't actually exist in a hierarchical model. And all human societies appear to run on hierarchical models. When you begin to, of course, peel the layers off, you actually realize it's not just a two-dimensional hierarchical model. It's actually a sort of three-dimensional holarchy, which is the compartmentalized, concentric, rings within rings, that sort of system. Basically, society is run on a need-to-know basis. That's going a wee bit deeper, but it's effectively, you can think of this priest class as the sort of Paleolithic deep state, and it's based upon the priest class, or the shamans, or the sort of druidic classes, who would be the controller of the information. They would be the wise elders, and they were given positions of reverence in the tribe. And this position of reverence provided them luxury and leisure. Now, luxury, or the luxury of leisure, rather, where their basic amenities were met, not by any work of their own, or the sweat of their own brow, but by the sweat of others. This allowed them to basically formulate, as we are, by the way, we have leisure time. This is why we're managing to discuss things. We're given dictations on our thoughts. We're discussing and building metaphysical models of not just the world, but of society itself, and of how the human psyche is structured, how society is the surrogate of the human psyche. And of course, I mean, it's not much of an extrapolation to realize that all you have to do, if we had the leisure, the luxury, the social standing, if we were beginning to come up with these ideas, these metaphysical frameworks of how the world works, how people work, how all of this is interconnected. I mean, if you were avaricious and a sardonic or a Sadian individual lacking any sort of moral scruples, and you had a great deal of cupidity, then of course it's not much of a stretch of the imagination to believe that you would start to use that knowledge that's been granted to you by your social standing as a priest, a high priest perhaps, or a shaman, or a druid, to then begin to apply that knowledge to control people,
For your benefit.
for your benefit. Exactly. So again, this it's not a stretch of the imagination. In fact, if you're not coming to these conclusions, you have to stop watching the football. If people are
Well,
listening to this,
it takes time, because it's like the little magic squares. They are truly magic for I'd say the uninitiated, but I don't like that term, because it's like a degree of I'm better than you and you're worse than me, which is like the strife that causes just about everything here. That's, to me, it's aggravating and annoying. Because it's like all the things you guys are just talking about, your perception of it, how you mention it, it's like that's exactly what's happening. It's like the writing has always been on the wall, and as you were saying, it's not the question of it's how much work have you done to be able to read, or not read, but information synthesis. What do you get out of it? Like, it's like being a person in a boat, a rowboat, right? You're in a pond or a boat in the sea, whatever. It doesn't matter. You're in the boat, you see the surface of the sea, and you're like, oh, I understand everything. Yes, we're good to go. And then you chart your course to what you think is, happy days, whatever. But then you are deathly afraid to dive in and see what's beneath the layer.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a balance thing as well. You see, I was talking to a guy I work with the other day. He's reasonably open-minded and kind of, tippy-toeing around these kinds of subjects and talking about it. And he was kind of open-minded. He understood the thing, and he was not. He grasped it to a certain point, and generally grasped it. But like at the end of the day, he comes back around. He's a working guy with a family, and he's trying to get on with things. And you can see where people have this strange kind of schizoid relationship with this kind of stuff, because
Well,
it's like, where do you go with it, like, as such? You know what I mean? I'm asking myself as well. Not just,
yeah.
I'm not
So
trying to be,
the balance thing is the key thing that you mentioned. And as far as the schizoid thing, so if a human or a consciousness or whatever you want to call it, you have two opposing viewpoints that exist simultaneously in your consciousness or your sphere
Yeah.
of awareness, whatever you want to call it, and they're contradictory to each other. That leads
Yeah.
to a self-lobotomizing effect, which is, by definition, a state of schizophrenia. And you guys were talking about earlier about like the AI and whatnot, that reality will become more and more diluted to the point that where people will not be able to discern like what is actually true and not. And like the mechanic of that, or I think of like a good analogy of it, is like, for example, money, right? Well, whatever people call money, cash, right? It's a physical, tangible. You withdraw it, you can give it to people, you can touch it, you can fold, you can do whatever you want with it, right? So they're removing that tangibility, that which what human beings and their understanding of their environment is predicated on the five senses. Well, there's more than five, but it doesn't matter. So if it doesn't, apply by those types of rules, it cannot be true. Or if you're of somebody that is not caught from the cloth of, I don't know, like an NPC status where you're just not passing through, but you're just observing, and you're just whatever, nothing, you don't really care about it. You're just going through the motions, the ritual motions, over and over and over again. You're not going to be able to see that. And then if you try to bring that to an attention of somebody like that, it's not ever going to be a good time, because it's not that they don't understand or they're too stupid. It's they don't think it's their idea, so it cannot be true, because in their mind, they think they're intelligent and smart. And you can't be as smart and intelligent as them, which goes back to that competition, the poverty consciousness programming. So
Yeah, but I can kind of see, like, why the ship is sailing in the direction it's sailing, because the average person is just feels completely disempowered by
Yes, well, that's
the normality.
that's the exact premise of it. Like that's what I've noticed, like throughout my, I don't know, experience here is, I was always told I can't be good enough. I'll never be good enough. Somebody else is always going to be better than me. Somebody else is always going to save me. Somebody else is going to do it for me. Trust the expert. Do this so you can get the benefit for it. And then
Yeah.
at the same time, which is the mind fuck, is they say nothing is free. So it's just like, oh, I don't have to do anything, which is, this welfare state, so to speak. But then that's the thing. It's like, you don't need to do anything. You can be as
Yeah.
shitty as you want, and you get a benefit for it. But then if
Yeah.
you're somewhat aware, you know that like both are like it's the adage in like the Bible. It says you cannot serve two masters at the same time. That's what it is. It's like, do you serve you? Do you serve you? And that's the next question beyond like that is, who are you? Who are you even serving?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And most people don't get that far, so they just take the handout.
Yeah, as you're on it, Silas, this is in the Book of the Law, and we're kind of nerding out on the number 47, but I think it's chapter 3, verse 47.
Oh yeah.
And this is where he has this cipher. And essentially, this is a little bit like the George Hodel. I remember I sent you a screenshot of George Hodel's cipher, I think, that he sent to the police.
The Zodiac killer sign, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, the Zodiac killer sent a number of correspondence to the police that were taunting the police, essentially. And one of them was a cipher that was put together in a kind of a grid form on a page where there was a bunch of letters on it. And actually, I think one of them was deciphered by yourself, Silas. And essentially, it said, "My name is George Hodel," or "I am George Hodel." Essentially, he was a doctor in LA back in the day, back in probably, I don't know when it was, 60s, 70s?
40s.
40s, rather. Actually, he's a very strange profile picture if you ever get a chance to look at it on Wikipedia. George Hodel's photograph, for a guy that was from the 40s, he looks like it was taken in the 90s. There's something very odd about the sort of tone of the photograph itself. It's just a standard portrait, but both his demeanor, which is incredibly smug, like he looks like a Hollywood actor smug, but the actual tone of the photograph doesn't look like it's from that era. It looks like it's
the time period. The theme is different. Like you feel like, for example, like I don't mean to interrupt, because like all the things you guys are saying just makes me think of experiences, things that I've noticed. So there's things that like pictures, sounds, and any information that's ingested, which is that make me feel like the 70s or the 80s or the 90s without even me being alive around for any of these things. But like there's like this, like, I guess you can say cadence or whatever it is, frequency, vibration, that's like, oh, this reminds me of the time, like around this time period. And it's not, like I said, necessarily out like I was there. Obviously I wasn't there, but it's the things that were put into your purview growing up that emulated, whether it's not necessarily the question, to the degree of what the theme or the mood was like at that time period. It kind of reminds me, when I say the word mood, is this book I have, didn't read it all the way, but it's the Fourth Turning of Man or something like that by whatever. But it reminds me of like the mood people are in at like a certain time, and it's very distinct, and it seems to be like a decade time period that it like is very distinct from the next decade.
Yes.
You don't.
And it's
you don't
actually
have
a very
I'll jump in.
it's a very interesting insight. It's one I thought about myself just recently, a few days ago, because it's like the manifestation of a given time, as you say, it has its own fingerprint, zeitgeist, vibe, like a mood pattern or tonality or feel,
Yeah,
and it kind of
all of those things, all those things.
yeah. But it's interesting. It's like, because as that pattern changes from, we say, decade to decade, or era to era, or generation to generation, you have this perception that time is passing. Yet I was kind of doing this thought experiment recently where I said to myself, right, I've just bought a kind of a new to me van that's reasonably new, and I'm driving to work and I'm looking at the van. It's a Ford van, and I'm kind of going, it's new. But I said to myself, imagine that I'm looking at this van and it's now 60, 70 years old, and it's sort of falling, more than falling apart, or it's in the scrap heap somewhere or whatever. And I was trying to kind of get my head around the space of that, the past as we view it in those moods or decade moods or zeitgeists that is really sort of, it's kind of it's sorcery, it's fiction. It's like,
Well, it is because it's rewriting of what is supposed to be, and like that's the other thing. Like I say, what it's supposed to be or what it was. Like I don't know that because it's already been altered before I wasn't even
yeah,
alive around to observe this natural quote unquote state that like epoch, I guess. Maybe not an epoch. Whatever. It's like 10 years. It's like a decade. Whatever. But it seems to extend a little bit beyond that. It's not like because it's like temporal changes. Like there's things
yeah,
that change within like small amounts of time, and then there's things that change within decades,
yeah,
and then there's things that change within a century, centuries, eons, so on and so
yeah,
forth. But what you guys were talking about earlier, I want to touch back upon that is when I think it was Silas that made the notion as all the information that people ingest is not like majority propaganda, like 99% propaganda.
yeah,
So it warps people's understanding and perception of the reality. And then, as you guys
yeah,
were talking about earlier, as far as like the term conspiracy theory, like, so the term conspiracy theory, the conspiracy comes before the theory, so it's already a conspiracy. And then, but
yeah,
people's understanding of existence and reality is based upon theories. The theory of relativity, the theory of gravity, the
yeah,
theory of so on and so forth. Like the theory part comes before because it's a theory. It still hasn't been proved. Theory of evolution, it still hasn't been proved. Like
yeah,
there's so many things that are missing that shouldn't be missing if one is to say that they know everything and they understand and they are better to lead everyone and so on and so forth. Like you need to have like tools and abilities to do that, and
mm,
the people that say that they have those tools and abilities are clearly do not have them.
mm, mm, mm. But just to hone back, go back in on this 47 thing and this cipher, and I'll probably close off myself here after the conversation soon enough. But I want to throw it out to Silas a little bit, because I know, Silas, in the past you were interested in the George Hodel Zodiac killer, decryption of these ciphers. So basically, what you have in this book of the law from Aleister Crowley is on chapter 3, verse 47 or paragraph 47. Essentially you've text on a page, and in the original book, as far as I'm aware, the text was handwritten, and it's obviously moving from left to right in English. But if you imagine the pattern of the writing is at an angle down, he writes it down across the page, we'll say, at a 30-degree angle. So he's writing at a slant, as if he had a notepad or he had the book on his lap and he just couldn't be bothered to kind of write it in a straight line. So it's written, at an angle going downward. Now, what you have on top of that angular writing is a grid that is superimposed on the writing. So unlike the Hodel thing, where every letter fits neatly into a given square on the grid, this grid seems to be superimposed sort of willy-nilly against over Crowley's slanted writing. So straight away, you're in the back of your head, you're trying to figure something out, but at the same time, you're going, Jesus, nothing fits into the grid here comfortably, because the handwritten script is not, like, individual letters are not neatly fitting in as one would expect to kind of, with a view to decrypting a cipher. So, however, now what, in summary, what we have is text, and we have a grid superimposed on the text. And at the left hand and the left hand side of the grid and the top side of the grid are letters and numbers that are given the grid its references. So from 1 to 9, for example, or A to G across the top. And then you have this text, which I'll read to you briefly. It's very short. And the reason I'm reading it to you is that I think that these lines are purposely inchoate or muddy or kind of vague, and some of the sentences are not coherent.
Language
And
builds civilizations.
Yeah, but as well, I think the language and the sentence are rather convoluted. And I think the reason they sound convoluted is they're trying to display certain words or numbers of words in the sentences potentially to add up to something. So I think there's a cipher, some hint of the cipher is in actually the lines. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I thought you wanted to.
No.
Okay, I'll read it briefly. I'll read it briefly. Okay, this is, so again, chapter 3, verse 37 from Crowley, the Book of the Law. Here we go. This book shall be translated into all tongues, but always with the original in the writing of the beast. For in the chance shape of the letters and their position to one another, in these are mysteries that no beast shall divine. Let him not seek to try, but one cometh after him, whence I say not, who shall discover the key of it all. Then this line drawn is a key, and I forgot to mention there's a diagonal slanted line that's scarred straight across this grid shape, moving
45
from
degree
top.
angle.
Yeah, sort of thing. Yeah, sort of thing. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
So here we go. Then this line is drawn a key. Then this circle squared in its failure is a key also. So I forgot to mention, in the center of the text as well, in the grid form, is a circle with a square form, a cruciform inside the circle rather. So a cross shape within the circle. And I'm getting to the end of it now. So then this line drawn is a key. Then this circle squared in its failure is a key also. And abracadabra. You note there, it's not abracadabra. You note that it's not abracadabra. It's abracadabra with a H. And final sentence, second last sentence. It shall be his child, and that strangely. Final sentence. Let him not seek after this, for thereby alone can he fall from it. So that's the text. Any comment on it?
Yeah, actually, yeah. So another thing, just really quickly to mention about 47, while we were speaking, and that I was looking up some Hebrew words that perhaps link to that, of course, with gematria.
Yeah.
And which is native to the Hebrew language. You have Zag. Zag is obviously is 47 in its gematria value, which means mirrors, polarity, duality, double states, inversion. So there's the 47 in that sense. And then, of course, you have the 47 mod of 22. Since there are 22 trumps, that equals 3. Of course, that corresponds with the Empress card. So again, it's relating to this notion of the surface level appearance masking a deeper truth. The 47 idea of the inversion of the will, which is the 4 of the form dominating the 7 of the spirit, or of the wandering spirit, right? Hence the wandering stars, which are 7 in number. So on that, the third I mean, of course, the third was it the third chapter of the 47th verse of the
Yeah.
Liberal Vel Legis, or the Book of the Law. This idea of the key of it all, it's it's extremely interesting. The book shall be translated into all tongues, but always with the original in the writing of the beast, Crowley. For in the chance shape of the letters and their position to one another, and these are mysteries that no beast shall divine. So obviously he's implying that there's going to be more beasts than, of course, Crowley, and then let him not seek to try, but one cometh after him. So this is relating to, of course, someone will come after Crowley to demystify this. Whence I say not, who shall discover the key of it all? Then this line drawn is a key. So the line, the 45 degree angle, we can assume. Perhaps it's another degree angle. Then this circle squared in its failure, that's relating to the sun circle. Perhaps relating to this notion of the idea that, of course, again, like the solar cycle, the seasonal cycle, and in the grander four faces of God cycle, which of course we see on the World Tarot card, all of those are done. They're inscribed within their failure, meaning they're all sort of dejections, or they're a bifurcation of God, as we were mentioning. And its failure is a key also. So the failure, the actual breaking apart of man, or breaking apart of God into man, that itself is a key. That man is the key. And abrahadabra. Well, you have abracadabra, and then you have avara cadavera. But I'm unsure about the abrahadabra. You see that a lot with Crowley. Crowley will
bastardize certain words.
Yeah, he bastardizes a lot of the occult
He'll invert what the truth is, because that's his purpose. That's his purpose.
Yeah.
So just finally as well, what we're reading here effectively is this notion that, again, the line, which is the phallic or the will, and the circle is the nuit or the infinity, the void, but not necessarily devoid. It is the singularity of all things, which, of course, to perceptual beings such as ourselves, we must perceive via delineation of form. Thus, if everything is contained within a singularity, an immanent singularity, then, of course, it would appear to us as just merely nothing, and almost a black sun, and if you will, or simply as night, is some sort of formless void. So this is what the circle is. And in the failure to square, that is the impossibility of unity, right? So the 4, again, is the form, and the 7 is this notion of the spirit. So the form dominates the spirit. There is a failure to square, there is an impossibility of unity, right? And moreover as well, you see these intersecting lines, which are within the circle, which form, of course, the solar cross, or the zodiacal sign, the zodiac killer's sign as well. This itself, it sort of implies that. It implies this notion of the phallic will and the material will over that of the nuit, or the infinity, or existing within it, and the failure to square that. So the modern mathematical curiosity, the 47 and the squaring of the circle. So pi prevents perfect squaring of the circle. Pi equals 3.14159, and interestingly, a very common rational approximation is 22 divided by 7, which equals 3.142857. I think it gets up to around about 10 numbers of pi before then it becomes, of course, inaccurate. So 22 and 7, there are 22 major arcana, 7 classical planets, 7 chakras, of course, 7 archangels. I mean, we could go down the line, 7 archons, so on and so forth. So sevenfold symbolism is absolutely everywhere, right? The seven obviously relates, of course, to the wandering stars, which are wandering, they're unbound to the circumpolarity of Polaris, which is, I guess, in a sense, the true god. And Saturn is this false god at the periphery, the final wandering star, at least within the classical astronomical view. So 4 equals the square, 7 equals the circle or the cosmos in this sense. Thus 47 equals the impossibility of reconciling the infinite with the finite. So this is exactly the theme of chapter 3, verse 47 of the Book of the Law. So the 47 symbolizes the boundary between order and infinity, the failure of the rational to contain the transcendent, the mask or hiding of the true key, the liminal gate where will is either found or lost, the cipher of the book itself. And we also see within that Book of the Law that Crowley repeatedly claimed that the book is encrypted mathematically and linguistically. So you have this sort of cryptographic or hidden cipher theme that's also present here as well, which of course we saw within the Zodiac Killer and also the Black Dahlia Killer, of whom I allege was Hodel, based on his son's testimony and his son's research as well. So a circle squared in its failure corresponds to the linear meaning versus cyclic meaning, the manifest versus transcendent, structure versus spirit, will versus freedom, the one versus the zero. So again, the structure that acts as a mask to hide the spirit, or to hide a far more profound and ineffable essence. So 47 within Thelema is essentially the number of the unfound key, the gate of the hidden interpretation, the failure that reveals, right? Because through the failure to square this circle, you have this sort of inclination to those with eyes to see, if you will, right? That there's a greater profundity to life than what the control structures peddle to the profane, as they would describe them, or just the masses in general. So 47 is the verse where Crowley is told he cannot understand, interestingly. He cannot understand this. Another will come who can. The key of it all is hidden. The symbols of line plus failed square appear. The entire book's encryption is encoded, right? So, of course, 47 is that idea of inversion, liminality, meaning sort of the transcendence of thresholds, transmutation, hidden structure, masked will, controlled chaos, the ritual of the false solution. So touching upon abracadabra, it is probably one of the most important and symbolically dense words in Crowley's Thelema, his Thelemite tradition. It appears prominently in Liber al Vel Legis, or the Book of the Law, especially in chapter 3, verse 47, where it is described as the word of the Aeon. This sets it apart from earlier magical words such as abracadabra, even though they appear similar. What does abracadabra mean? It is a symbolic formula of transformation, unity, and completion. Crowley describes it as the word of the Aeon of Horus. Horus is, of course, the child reborn, the widow's son. It's the same idea as man within the fallen state, awaiting the repair of God by his own deviceful hands. Again, this will symbolize man's transcendence beyond his creator, the sort of creation leaping forth from the canvas, snatching away the brush of creation and painting himself a new portrait, painting himself a new landscape, a new environment in which to dwell, becoming himself God. The formula of the crowned and conquering child, this is Horus, and a symbolic representation of the great work accomplished, The crowned and conquering child, this links with Kabbalah. I mean, that's... Perhaps Crowley wasn't aware of this. I can imagine he probably was. This and the great work, the magnum opus, effectively, though it's depicted as a personal journey, that is merely just to hide the greater political intent behind the adaptive camouflage of the mystery religion itself. And the crowned and conquering child is a nation. It's not the Antichrist, it's not an individual, it will be a nation, right? Just like what you see in Kabbalah, the Mashiach, which would be, of course, the Islamic Al-Masih al-Dajjal, the false Messiah, or, of course, the Christian Antichrist. That, or the beast as well. That itself is a nation, beyond the metaphor. And we know this because in the Zohar, it quite rightly states that the Mashiach, Ben David, as opposed to Ben Yosef, which will be the political Messiah, as opposed to the Ben David as the spiritual Messiah, which will come about after the Tikkun and after the events of the 6th millennia. Or millennium, rather. So this, I mean, I don't really want to say it, but it's effectively Israel, right? The crowned and conquering child will be Israel. So, for example, it mentions in Exodus 4:22, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. Hosea 11:1, when Israel was a child, I loved him. So you have this constant biblical motif that Israel is God's child, and the child itself is that of divine innocence, right? It's of the human being, the being itself, that is undirtied, who is pure, of course juxtaposed to the world, right? He is untainted by the world's filth. So again, it's relating to something that's divine, something that's pure. These are all relating to Israel. And you see this idea of Horus. Horus itself relates to... I won't get into this very much. I mean, my Blood on the Sand book and details this. If you go into Odyssey and Rumble, I also have the Blood on the Sand series, which detail this. I believe they're still up there, and effectively this relates to the Hyksos, right? This is the reason you see Egyptian iconography and Egyptian terminology throughout all of these sort of Kabbalistically derived mystery religions. It's because they have effectively plagiarized it from them. So Israel is described as a royal priesthood, Exodus 19:6. Kings like David and Solomon represent the nation's idolized crown. Crowning can symbolize receiving divine favor or responsibility. So in a literary or metaphorical sense, the crowned equals the chosen, right? Those chosen to bear a spiritual role or covenant. The chosen, the crowned ones, those who have the Keter, those who unleashed the corona, right? Or who have the corona, who gained a corona through the corona, if you will. So it's all of these ideas. The conquering, hardship, exile. Again, the child is also enfeebled. It's something that's smaller in stature, again, like Israel. And Israel conquered, even with that smaller stature, being a small nation. We see this, of course, metaphorically crystallized within the myth of that of David and Goliath, right? So it's that sort of idea. So the conquering equals enduring suffering and returning renewed. So you have the bondage in Egypt. Of course, this is all propaganda, of course, but this is their propaganda. The exile in Babylon, trials in the wilderness. So you have this, this idea of the indefatigable spirit that is within this nation, right? So of course, the idea is as well is that they have conquered spiritually too. So they have effectively supplanted all other identities with the Abrahamic identity through, of course, various means. So Israel would be the crowned child because of its covenant with God. It's a child of God. It's the firstborn of God, according to the various verses we read there. And the conquering child because of its survival and renewal, right? Now, yes, the Israel of the Bible is probably different to the Israel that we see now, politically speaking, the political Israel. But what you must remember, that's not how it's playing out within Kabbalistic ritual. For all intent and purposes, the God of the Bible is them. Yahweh was a literary creation of them. He doesn't exist. It's a completely fictitious sky fairy. It's an egregore. It's effectively, it is the nation and the spirit of the nation deified. In fact, you could look throughout all of the various deities. That is what deities are. None of them exist. They're outgrowths of personal or collective archetypes. And of course, those archetypes are utilised by writers of fiction. And the writers of fiction, because again, most people can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality, between fiction and non-fiction. All of this blends together, and the script writers who write or formalize the ideas behind the society or civilization, they fundamentally use psychologically compatible language and structure, which just so happens to be overlapping with that of narrative writing, playwrights, stagecraft, all of this. So yes, society is a theatre for all intent and purposes. So Horus is the Rahur Huit. So it's the solar deity, it's the falcon-headed child. In Crowley's system, of course, it's the new Aeon. It's the Phoenix, effectively. It's the Adam Kadmon. And of course, Kabbalah, it's the symbolizing of victory, strength, renewal, effectively awakening. The transcendence of man into God status. So this is the transition from the Aeon of Osiris, which is the sort of sacrifice, guilt, moralism, the idea of the dead man, the god who fell to earth, the star who fell to earth, hence why, of course, we're in the shape of the star. We have 5 appendages, like the pentacle, which is the universal symbol of the star, of any star. So we are Orion, if you will. We are asleep. We are in slumber. We are awaiting to remake ourselves into God, to repair God, by thus repairing ourselves, by the Tikkun Olam, the repairing of the world, the rectification of the fall of Eden, right? All of these notions. So that's the Aeon of Osiris. We're in this fall. We're seeking the Aeon of Horus, this basically the selfhood, the godhood. We will emerge and ascend. That's the crowning of the conquering child. And in Kabbalah, not everyone will make it. That's why they're whittling us down. It's a mass, global initiation ritual. And of course, with any initiation ritual, there is, well, in typical initiatory rituals, there's a symbolic death. However, in this sense, there is real death going on. I mean, the obituaries in my local newspaper are off the bloody charts. I mean, I've never seen so many people die. I've just in the past 2 months had 3 funerals that I've attended. I attended my grandfather's funeral last week due to rapid onset cancer. Right? Again, as it states in the Zohar, when the time of Tikkun arrives, Hashem will smite them with a plague, and that plague will eat the evil ones, the Samael, Esau, the Rome. It will eat their flesh while they still stand. Of course, cancer. And that in other Zoharic passages, it mentions that he will afflict them with emerods. Now, that can mean 2 things. It can mean hemorrhoids, right, which I haven't heard a lot of that. Perhaps that's an adverse effect. Oh, sorry, I mean, perhaps that means that the needlecraft is working. I haven't heard a lot of that, but another meaning of emerods is tumours. He will afflict them with tumours that will eat their flesh. I mean, I think the idea is with that passage in the Zohar, and again, I don't have the Hebrew of that passage, I only have the English translation, so it mentions that, you know, there's a sense of urgency in the language, you know, meaning it will rapidly eat them, eat their flesh while they still stand. That will all be coming up. All of those quotes will be coming up in a video I'm going to do on the Tikkun. But just so we're aware, all of this is related to what Crowley is stating, and to, of course, the number 47 as well. I mean, there's all of this creates a spider's web, and that isn't by accident if you know about Yabulon. Anyway, so the abrahadabra is literally the completion of the great work, the union of opposites, the hieros gamos, the coincidentia, the conjunctio, or coincidentia oppositorum, the conjunction of the opposites, the coinciding of the opposites. So the offspring of the line hadit and the circle nuit, so of will and of the essence or the spirit, the ineffable, the unknowable, the agnostos theos. Basically, Lucifer, the idea of Lucifer, he was the fallen angel, but he's going to re-emerge. He's going to reach heaven once more. He's going to reify his ascent and again unify himself once more with this lost home of his. The idea is that we are the fallen angels. So it also means as well the circle squared in its failure refers to the mathematical impossibility of squaring the circle with compass and straight edge, as we see, of course, on masonry, or in the Masonic sigil rather. The infinite cannot be perfectly expressed by the finite. Reason cannot contain infinity. The cosmos circle cannot be reduced to one formula, square. Human will cannot be imprisoned in rigid structure, So, this is essentially a paradoxical koan. The failure is the key. The idea of embracing the impossibility rather than attempting the completion. So this is what they're doing through AI. They're attempting it, right? Or rather embracing the impossibility of it. They know they can never attempt to square the circle. So if they can't square the circle, they'll simply just make their own circle that they'll try and square within virtual space. Do you see the sort of liminality that's going on here? Again, there's a mathematical problem here, so what they're doing is they're simply changing the variables, they're reframing it, they are simplifying it, in a sense, because that's the only way they can possibly defeat, if you will, this notion of the squaring of the circle. Essentially man becoming God. So continuing on, yeah, it's the completion of the magical formula. the great work, the achievement of the true selfhood. So it's a symbolic statement. It's not necessarily, a literal spell. That's essentially the profane interpretation of it. There's not ghosties or goblins or ghouls. That's not what this is discussing. What it's discussing is how the world functions, and of course, are there ways in which we can, in a sense, initiate ourselves as both the gatekeepers of this knowledge and of this information of the functioning of the world, and also emerge as titans in and of our own rights, or gods in our own right, through this knowledge, through this information. So Abrahadabra has 11 letters. There's the 11 again, 4 plus the 7. It's also possesses a symmetry. It's the same forward as it is in reverse. It's a palindrome. This mirrors the thelemic importance of 11 equals the number of magic. Again, we've went into that, why that is the case. A as the infinite, the void. H as the spirit. This is opposed to C, but we'll get into that. D as manifestation, right? Crowley saw the pattern as representing a completed cycle, the movement of will from the formless A into the form D and back into unity. This is also why Crowley mentioned that, for in the Chan shape of the letters and their position to one another, meaning that there is a magical geometry with the letters. What he's implying there is that the letters, it's not a literal spell. The letters are there for specific reasons, specific symbolic reasons. In fact, the entire thing, if you take all of the atoms of the letters, congeal them together into a body, the word, then the word of power itself is not a word per se, it's not the frequency. It is the symbol underlying it. Remember, words contain concepts. They are sound which carries concept. Thus, the Abrahadabra is a symbol. It's not necessarily a word that's meant to be understood by everyone, but it's a symbol. It is a word that whose meaning is a conceptualization of this cycle, right? The movement of will from the formless A into the form D and back into the formless unity A, the Ouroboros, if you will. Crowley insisted Abrahadabra is the true and complete word. Abracadabra is the corrupt or incomplete form. Abracadabra, which historically was sometimes used as a healing charm, diminishes letter by letter. It represents the dissipation of force, fading, reduction, dissolution. It's also probably from avracadabra, or avracadabra, which is Aramaic. There are two Aramaic words. The first avracadabra is I destroy by speech, essentially. I destroy with what I speak. And an abracadabra is I create by that which I speak. So abrahadabra represents expansion, completion, integration, not dispersal. So its role in Thelema in the Book of the Law, it is the signature of the new aeon, as we've mentioned, a declaration of the great work fulfilled, the formula of the union between microcosm and macrocosm, again, man becoming God, a symbol of the child God, which represents growth, will, and self-realization. Crowley explicitly wrote, Abrahadabra is the word of the aeon, or the new aeon of Horus. So, meaning, it encapsulates the spirit, the ethics, and the metaphysics of Thelema and its eschatology. In Crowley's system, Abrahadabra equals 418. 418 is central in Thelema, It corresponds to the Tetragrammaton completed, the great work accomplished, the manifestation of unity. Is exactly what we've been discussing, the tikkun, the repair of God via man's own intellect, his own intuition, his own initiative. his own psycho-spiritual initiative. 418 also appears in the title of Liber al vel legis, which is Liber CCXX, as delivered by XCI equals 418 unto DCLXVI. Of course, translating that out of Roman numerals, we get Liber X CCXX, which is 200 plus 20, 220. So Liber 220, XCI 91, 418 of course that stays the same as in Arabic numerals, and then DCLXVI 666, right? So essentially the book 220, Liber 220, as delivered by 91 equals 418 unto 666. So what that means is essentially there's 220 number of verses in the Liber al legis, the book of the law. 91 is the value of Amen, Ewas, those are unifying formulas, we'll go into that. And then 418 is the value of Abrahadabra, the word of the Aeon. And then 666 is obviously Crowley's self-identification as the beast. But the beast as well is almost the prophet, this idea of the prophet. So the idea behind this is that 220 is the completion, the revelation, the finite container which unveils the infinite content held within. So it's the notion of the finite manifestation of an infinite principle. And you see the 220, which is 2 plus 2, 4. So again, there's that idea of the 4, the form, the structure, manifestation, the material world. So the idea is that the finite manifestation of an infinite principle is contained within the revelation conveyed through the structure of the material world. Exactly what we've been discussing within the mystery religions. How do we gain an understanding of the world to thus break free from the bounds of the world, like some sort of Promethean figure unshackling the chains, or some sort of Luciferian figure? 91, Amen, Ewas, union. So Ewas is the voice. That's who dictates the book of the law. So it's connected, of course, to 91. Amen also has the Hebrew gematria value of 91 as well, I believe. So the 9 plus the 1 is the completion. The 10, as we were talking about, that's the number of manifestation. It's the harmonizing of the microcosm and macrocosm, and the beginning and the end. So the 91 is the number of uniting the worlds. Because, of course, Amen equals so be it, at least traditionally within biblical linguistic studies. So it's a completion of the cycle, in a sense. So it's the seal that joins will to the objective reality of that which we've been detached from and only seen glimpses of. Again, like the veiled Isis, can never truly grasp the direct nakedness of the divine feminine. This is what this seeks to, of course, undo, to unclothe her, to rip off her garments, and to understand the world and thus become God. This notion. Abrahadabra 418. We've already went through that. It's the reconciliation of will plus love. Thelema plus agape, the join of the line and the circle, the hadith and the nuit, the male and the female. This is why you have transgenderism as well, by the way, the joining of all of this. So 418 means the self brought to wholeness, the individuation, if you will. But it's not just a personal journey. This is also a grand global initiation. So 666 finally is the beast, the solar principle. Literally, it's the sun. Quite literally, it's the Apis bull. It's the beast of the field. He who tills the field, again, like the writer, right? Goes line by line by line, seeding the revelation within the pages, the vellum of the text. It's the radiant and creative force, the center of the solar system, the self as a star, the man as a god, the embryonic yolk, solar yolk that's waiting to burst forth from the shell of the egg. So every man and every woman is a star. That's chapter 1, verse 3 of the Book of the Law. It's that notion, right? We're all fallen stars, and we must return back to where we have fallen from, which is, of course, the tapestry of heaven. We must become one of the Elohim. By the way, this is all hardwired. It's encoded even into the revealed revelations and revealed religion of Abrahamism. I mean, you only have to look at Genesis. It doesn't take much of an exegetical leap of logic and interpretation to see what was going on there, and to see that, in fact, the idea was set within Genesis 3, verse 24. I believe it was verse 24. It might be verse 22. I'm not going to look it up now, but it's the idea where Yahweh exclaims, we have to cast him out. If he eats from the tree of life as well, he'll just be like us, knowing both good and evil. But the thing is, they were eaten from the tree of life within the garden prior to, of course, partaking of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. There's the 1 and the 2, right? This bifurcation idea that we were talking about at the beginning of the discussion. So it's the solar life-giving, self-determining will. That's effectively what was provided with the eating of the fruit of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. And again, that detached us. There was a bifurcation that occurred between man and God, where man became this sort of detached, materially bound entity. This is the belief. I'm not saying this is true, this is the belief. So thus, that must be rectified, right? So yeah, effectively, revelation, union, completion, self-realization, or self-deification, self-apotheosization, becoming God, effectively. So just to run through some of this just really, really, really quickly, because I've went on for a bit and I've rambled. So, oh yes, just a slight correction. It's Amen that's 91, Ewas is 93, so there you have the 12. That's, of course, the zodiacal sign. The 418 is 13. So that links with the Ophiuchus and the Golden Gate, but we won't go into that. That's something entirely different. But it's the same sort of concept. Man goes from the Silver Gate, Orion, he awakens into the Ophiuchus, he wrestles with his own mind, the serpent, or dances with it. Again, you're not quite sure. There's always this doubt, because doubt itself is the key to liberation. This is what the mystery religions teach to the initiates. Yes, it shall be his child, and that strangely. So the one who discovers the key will also understand Abrahadabra. It will be the symbolic offspring of the completed cipher. This is the idea of Israel and the Kabbalah. So they have found the priest class, Kohanim Gadol, the high priests, they of Israel, they have understood this, right? This is why the child is theirs. This is why they are chosen to conquer the world. They understand the way that the world effectively functions. That's the idea here, right? They've got an irreducible, fundamental, deep understanding of the world. Hence, they will come to rule the world. This is what he's mentioning here. Crowley, where he states, "It shall be his child, and that strangely." These mysteries are inscrutable to me. So he openly states he cannot decode the verse. He notes the letters resemble those in the Book of Enoch. Again, there's the Merkava idea, which is the cosmic structure, and this notion of how the world works. The Book of Enoch, of course Ezekiel as well, relate to especially the Book of Enoch, specifically the Book of Enoch, relates to the Watchers, the Grigori. You had, I believe it was 200 of the fallen who rallied around, the fallen angels, they rallied around Shamyaza, whose Hebraic etymological meaning of that name relates to he who looks at the heavens, is trying to grasp at the heavens. It's that idea that you see in the Oscar Wilde quote of, there's many of us who are in the gutter, but some of us are staring at the stars, right? Basically that's Shamyaza. It's this notion of Shamyaza, which is man, who has fallen, and who has all of these other nations around him. And Shamyaza is effectively Israel, he who wrestles with God. So it's pretty clear there, Jacob became Israel, he who wrestles with God. Shamyaza, he who stares at the heaven. The idea is that he's, trying to seek a way back. So Shamyaza, he founded the first secret society on imprecations of death, which were basically blood oaths, blood curses, that if you, of course, opened your mouth, or if you went against the secret society, you would be completely, you'd be murdered, you'd be smote down as an infidel. So this is exactly what you're seeing there. This is where secret societies began. This is the law of transgression. This is the beginning of I guess you would call it the Luciferian agenda, right? I mean, you can call it many things. The Kabbalistic eschatology is another notion. The sort of incremental leading up to the final battle between good and evil, right? Again, these are all self-fulfilling prophecies. I'm not saying this is how it is, but if everyone believes this, if they're all effectively aware of the Abrahamic religions or are adherents of them, then of course the eschatology becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy at some point, because everyone is running in that general direction, so to speak. Do you see what I'm saying? So it becomes, at a certain point, irreversible, becomes a done deal. So yeah, it relates to the Book of Enoch. According to Crowley, that attribution is unsupported by actual evidence, but that's what he speculates. He also mentions it relates to the Magus 9 degree versus equals 2, so that's the 2 square. It's a grade in Crowley's mystical system. He means, through this, a person only needs to reach this grade, not higher, to understand the key. The one who comes after him may be such a person. So Crowley identifies the one who comes after him with Achad. He thought, at least for a time, that Achad was the one destined to find the key. Achad believed he discovered the key of it all, the significance of Al and La, the line drawn, the circle squared in its failure. Crowley later disagreed, doubted, or walked back this. So the line drawn, the symbolic formula for straightness, singularity, unity, the one, the ego, the will, the directed will, manifestation, phallic symbol. In geometry, a line is one-dimensional, representing pure direction without substance. In occult symbolism, it is hadith, the point becoming line, representing will and motion. This is where of course, the monad, the dot, the singular dot, the circle, eventually becomes the line, right? It emits light, the Ein Sof Hour, the limitless, unknowable light of the nothingness. This is how Kabbalah came about, through the divine contraction, and to reach once more this sort of nothingness, if you will, this godhood, as they call it, we ourselves must have We must put the pieces, the divine sparks, back together. This is the reversal of the Shevret HaKalim, which is the breaking of the vessels, and that thus we must go through the birth pangs once again of the Simsum, which was the initial divine contraction which spurted out this light and birthed it into the void, right? The unknowable void, the pleroma, as the Gnostics called it. This is what created the pleroma, the pureness of this white, illimitable light, right? So to get back to that, we have to effectively go through these birth pangs once more. And this is how the Zohar discusses it, along with other exegetical works, not just within Judaism and Kabbalah, but also out with the derivations, the various offspring of the broodmare of Kabbalah. They all speak about it in this way, the birth pangs, that we will be travailed by birth pangs. In fact, even the Bible mentions it. I think it is an Old Testament passage that mentions this. We will be travailed by birth pangs, So the circle squared in its failure. So it represents the impossibility of squaring the circle, a classic mathematical symbol for reconciling finite and infinite, solving the irreconcilable, attempting to capture perfection with imperfect means, because perfect squaring of a circle is impossible, as we've mentioned. So symbolically, as we've discussed previously as well, the infinite nuate cannot be contained by reason, true will cannot be defined or limited by structure, the cosmos cannot be reduced to a formula. Esoterically, the failure is the key. Realizing what cannot be reconciled is itself the doorway, right? So it's understanding through negation, through realizing we will never understand everything, as of course Socrates mentioned. This is why Socrates was never initiated into the mystery religions that we know of, but of course Plato, Pythagoras, they were all initiated, and Pythagoras, funnily enough, was initiated into by what's his name, Nazari, which is effectively a Greek transliteration of Nazarene. He was initiated into Kabbalah, and then of course he went on to found his namesake became the Pythagorean society, which was a secret society based out of the island of Samos, which is in modern-day northern Turkey, just off the coast, west of Pontus, I believe. So yeah, this is why Socrates was never initiated. He already knew the mysteries. Anyway, yeah, so we've went over abracadabra. It's the symbolic offspring of the marriage of will and infinity. Let him not seek after this, for thereby alone can he fall from it. Do not overreach, that's what it means. Once the key is found, stop. Go no further. The idea is, if you go any further, you'll go into madness, like that of Nietzsche. Or of course, if you even go further and further and further and further, eventually you're going to awaken the dreamer of the grandest dream of it all. And then you'll simply just cease. Right? You'll cease even being a thought, an aberrant thought within the void, within nothingness. You'll just cease entirely. So the danger is in seeking further or attempting to improve the revelation. Crowley interprets this psychologically as hubris after discovery leads to collapse. This is what we're going through. Discovering the key does not make one invulnerable. Obsession destroys insight. So the verse basically states that the book contains hidden messages encoded in the arrangement of its letters. And of course, as we've seen as well, it's numbers. But Crowley is forbidden and unable to decode them. This is what Maimonides mentions. You're forbidden. Well, he's unable. Crowley's unable, but you're forbidden to mention this to the profane. What I'm mentioning to you right now, I mean, of course, if I was part of a secret society, of course, based upon oaths of imprecation, I'd be dead. I'd be dead. And they say, oh, well, Masonry, they don't do that anymore. They did in the beginning. They did in the beginning. They don't anymore because the Blue Lodge secrets are out. I mean, in Masonry, they don't really require it anymore. Masonry was just a vehicle to take over European civilization and to effectively clamp the Kabbalistic hold into the nobility and intelligentsia and the moneyed interests that were native to Europe, and of course America as well, eventually, later on America, you know, in a greater manner, to a greater degree. This is why Rosicrucianism was prevalent there too, which was a precursor of Masonry, and also of course alchemy as well. And there's various other ones. I mean, we could go through them all, even all the way back to the Knights Templar. I mean, remember, Christianity, does not have temples. What Abrahamic religion has temples? I'll let you work that one out. But yeah, so it's, yeah, effectively, you know, I would be killed if I was part of these secret societies. Even mentioning this, especially when you start going into etiology, cosmogony, the origins of the cosmos, God, man, and you decipher it beyond the literal. That's a huge issue, right? Huge issue, because if enough people sort of hearken to that and they internalize it, the entire culture falls. Media wouldn't work. Propaganda wouldn't work. If you realize you're living within one giant theatre performance, then of course, and all of it is a complete lie based upon false memory and completely false, you know, a false worldview implants, then you realize that you're in fact living within the bounds of a hall of mirrors, an illusion. But the illusion fails at that point to have any effect upon you. And if you can't be bound by their illusory techniques anymore, then of course, if that is extrapolated to enough people, eventually it'll take hold in society, and the society will fall apart, because society only functions on the abrogation of human agency to the state. You have to give up your agency, surrender your sovereignty, your mental, psychic, bodily, and timeous, meaning temporal, or that relating to time. You have to give up all of that, your control over that, your sovereignty over that, to the control system itself. This is how societies function. Break that, and you start loosening all the chains. And you would just unshackle everything. There would be emancipation within the chaos, if you will. So yes, someone who comes after him will discover the key, which is related to the symbolic ideas of the line and the failed squaring of the circle, as we've mentioned. The discovery will produce the formula of abracadabra. Once found, the seeker must not try to go beyond it, or they will lose the insight. Crowley admits, or even destroy themselves. Crowley admits he cannot understand it, but believes the future solver may be someone like Achad. And of course, Achad means the first, the single, the one, the monad, he who is alone, who is basically above all the others, that notion. And yeah, so this appears firstly within Genesis 1:5, the first day, of course, or even Genesis 2:24 as well, where they become one flesh. So this Hebrew term appears there. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That's all I wanted to mention on that. I've went on for quite some time. So yeah, thank you guys. Thanks.